Hello there, guys. How are you doing? This is Rob. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I hope you're having a fantastic final week to 2023. Yes, that's right. We are in the final countdown to the end of the year. 2024 is barreling towards us at lightning speed. It is going to be a few days before we're in a whole new year, and it's crazy, man. January 1st happens all the time, but it still feels fresh and nutty every time we actually come to January 1st. So I thought it would be fun this week to do something a little bit simpler and something that I used to do a lot more often, something I really love to do, which is a Q&A. And so I reached out to you guys on Twitter and I said, hey, haven't done a Q&A in a while, so why don't you ask me some gaming questions? And I'll pick a few, answer them on a video, give you a shout out. And that's what I'm doing today. So we're, of course, pretty much talking about Nintendo stuff. That's what you guys usually like to ask me about. And of course, Metroid is a big focus. I only picked 5 questions, so before I get into the actual questions and the answers, I of course want to thank you guys who did ask questions. I chose them fairly quickly, so some questions might have come in after I chose the 5 I wanted to do. But of course, if you did not get your question answered in this video, then I do invite you to follow me on Twitter. I am insanely active. I'm tweeting every day about gaming stuff, Nintendo stuff, lots of movie conversation, lots of me yelling and crying over the Broncos on if we're doing well or not well. But I'm very active and I talk to a lot of you guys on Twitter, so I do appreciate that. So yeah, with all this stuff out of the way, again, final week of the year, let's answer a couple of questions from you guys on Twitter. First Twitter question comes from a fellow YouTuber friend of mine, Pat at Nintentalk. What's up, man? Thanks for asking me a question. And he had a great one, so I wanted to answer it. He said, here's a question for you. How would you feel if Metroid Prime 4 had more of a focus on online multiplayer, such as deathmatch, etc., over a big single-player campaign? I really think Metroid could be Nintendo's Halo. So the long-running Metroid multiplayer first-person shooter deathmatch question. This is a big one. This has been a topic in kind of the Metroid space for decades, really. Ever since they first tried going multiplayer, which, as we all know, was Metroid Prime 2 Echoes on the GameCube, where they had an offline deathmatch multiplayer mode. There was 2 or 3 modes, I think, to that at the time. And at the time, kind of to your point and your question, Pat, it was almost seen as Nintendo trying to have a bit of an answer, so to speak, to Halo, because for those of you who do or don't remember, or were not gaming at the time, back in 2004, Halo 2 and Metroid Prime 2 released in the same, week or two. Halo 2 was November 9th, and I want to say Metroid Prime 2 was November 14th or 15th, the following week. I know because I was working as an assistant manager at GameStop at the time, and I remember the releases of both games, and I was excited for both. So, Metroid Prime 2 stuff from 20 years ago aside, as far as Metroid Prime 4 goes, it's an interesting question, and I think that the game Metroid Prime 4 will find itself in an interesting situation. Personally, if I was to just talk about my personal desires, the only thing I truly care about and truly think they need to nail is the single-player story and the evolution of the adventure she's been going on in Metroid Primes 1, 2, or 3. If there's anything that I think the game has to be, first and foremost, it has to be a Samus single-player adventure with a really interesting story and new lore and fun gameplay and beautiful graphics and varied environments and all that stuff. We're going from Metroid Prime 3 to Metroid Prime 4. It's got to deliver on that front. Now, could a multiplayer mode of some kind accompany the game or be part of it? Absolutely. I don't think they need to do it, but I think that they could do something very cool. And if I'm even being honest, maybe this would make a good video in the next couple days or weeks or so. I kind of am starting to think that they should have some kind of a multiplayer. Beyond whether or not I want it or if I would ever play it, if they actually incorporate something solid that does not overshadow or take away from the single player, but is a great way to keep the game alive in the hearts and minds of gamers after we've played and beaten it, keep the conversation around Metroid Prime 4 going for months upon months, if not a year or two after the game is released, there is a huge advantage to a quality multiplayer experience. Again, don't just kind of tape something together with band-aids and duct tape, like you kind of did with Metroid Prime 2. Make it something substantial and quality, and there could be something to it. The only last thing I'll touch on, because you mentioned it being, how do you say? You say, how would I feel if Metroid Prime 4 had more of a focus on online over a big single-player campaign? I don't know if you meant it this way, but all I will say is I don't think that the game should be a multiplayer game first. That would be the death knell for the game. Single player first. That's the only thing that truly matters. If you do a multiplayer, fine. If it's bad, it won't hurt the game if the campaign is good. If it's good, it'll only help the entirety of the game in the package be that much more successful and popular in quality, and again, keep it alive in the conversation for months or years after it releases. The second question today also comes from another fellow YouTuber buddy of mine, whose name is Robert, and he is at Trebor203, as you guys can obviously see. So what's up, fellow Rob? Thanks for the question, buddy. He says, my top 3 Nintendo franchises that could become good movie franchises. Well, Nintendo movies are obviously a very big conversation as well right now, right? Because we had the Mario movie this year, which was a mammoth hit, bigger than even the highest expectations, 1.3, 1.4 billion. I know it was at least 1.3. It might have just barely cracked 1.4. Second highest grossing movie of the year behind Barbie. Mario was a big deal. And so beyond that, the more exciting news to me was that we got confirmation that there is a Legend of Zelda in the works directly from Miyamoto. And my favorite news about all of that is that it's going to be live action. So my imagination is just bursting with ideas and excitement inside over what a live action Zelda movie could be, because it is my dream come true. I think it's going to be incredible. So my top 3 Nintendo franchises that could become good movie franchises, well, 2 of them are obvious. One, Legend of Zelda, which they're finally doing, and again, I think live action is the correct route for that, but whatever direction they went, a Zelda movie was always a smart choice. They're doing that now. The second one, more obvious, Metroid. A live action Metroid movie? Oh, I want it so badly. And for those of you who maybe don't know this, back in I want to say the early to mid 2000s, there were actual plans, and I think even early writings and pre-production, very early, on a Metroid movie that was going to be directed by John Woo, who was an action director of the 90s and 2000s. He made Hard Target with Jean-Claude Van Damme. He made Mission Impossible 2 and a couple of other ones. Just a big, stylish action guy, and he was going to make a Metroid movie in 2003 or something like that. And so I wouldn't want a John Woo Metroid movie today, but something like a Denis Villeneuve kind of Metroid movie, something a little bit more noir and stylistic, but also very to the point and focused on Samus. Ooh, that could be great. So Zelda and Metroid are the easiest ones. The third one, a little bit trickier, because honestly, Mario is the obvious choice, but we've already had 2 Mario movies, live action in '93 and the animated one this year. But if I step aside from Mario, the only other 2 that jump to my mind, and I think they would be tough sells as far as making them financially successful, but as far as what the games and the universes and the characters and the lore within the games are, 2 that jump to my mind would be Star Fox, which I'll admit would be ideal animated as opposed to live action. And the other might be Fire Emblem, because Fire Emblem is so character-based and dialogue-based, and there's such an intricate emotional relationships between the characters, whether they're political relationships, romantic relationships, friendship relationships, teacher and student relationships, like in Three Houses, whatever the case. There's a lot of interpersonal drama in Fire Emblem, and it's also in a fantasy setting with dragons and magic and sword-swinging fighting action, right? So you could tackle a Fire Emblem movie in a couple of different ways. I also think live action would be ideal for that, but you could do a CG animated. You could even do an anime version or something like that. There's a lot of ways you could go with that. Star Fox is more exciting to me because I just like Star Fox more, and I think you could make a really fun kind of action-adventure movie out of Star Fox. But either way, those would be my answers. Next question comes from Protodermis at Anchordown902 on Twitter, who is a very regular commenter and follower. I think a really big Xbox fan too, so love chatting with you on Twitter. Thanks for the question. And Protodermis asks, what do you want from the next 3D Mario? Do you have any original ideas you'd love to see implemented? I personally think it's time Mario got the Breath of the Wild treatment. Full open world, Mushroom Kingdom, quests, side quests, big emphasis on exploration. Great question, because the next 3D Mario game, we know Nintendo's cranking away on that thing, and more than likely will be releasing on the Switch 2 or the next-gen console. And sure, I have some ideas about the next 3D Mario and what I would like it to be. I'm actually pretty open in what I'd want it to be. I just want it to be a great adventure with a lot of variety, a new gameplay gimmick, and just really cool locations to go through. Because I know the gameplay is going to be great Mario gameplay no matter what. The big thing you talk about, which is something everyone wants nowadays, which is to take a game that's not traditionally open world and give it the Breath of the Wild treatment, which was such an amazing, I mean, in my opinion, Breath of the Wild is still the best open world map I've ever played in a game. You know, I love Skyrim. I love Fallout. I love these games with big open worlds. Ghost of Tsushima is a recent one that I just think is incredible. But really, the Breath of the Wild Hyrule map, and by extension, Tears of the Kingdom, best open world maps I've ever played in. So, giving a game like Mario that kind of a treatment is certainly something I'm into. In fact, Mario Odyssey was sort of, I think, like a little bit of a compromise for Nintendo to make a Mario game that is got open world elements to it, but is also still structured in a level-based, world-based way like traditional Mario games, because you have different worlds to go to and travel to, and you go jump back and forth between them. But they're also pretty big maps by Mario standards, and each little map is kind of like a mini version, very mini version of a little open world. And so I think Mario Odyssey is a little bit overrated, but it is a game that did that very well, and it is my favorite part to that game. And so if they were to do something like Bowser's Fury, right, and just dial that up to 11 and make a $60, $70 next-gen Mario game that's kind of an open-world approach like Bowser's Fury, I think that'd be great. I think everyone would welcome it. They would take to it. It would be very successful. People would be excited about Mario in open world. And there's something about being able to be in like a desert Mario world, but being able to see in the distance like the Mushroom Kingdom, the way you can see Hyrule Castle from like Gerudo Desert or whatever. And you can go from Gerudo Desert and just travel without loading all the way to Hyrule Castle. What if you could do that from like a lava location or a snow location or a desert location in a huge Mushroom Kingdom map, but you can see the castle, Mushroom Kingdom Castle, whatever it's called, Peach's Castle, way in the distance, and you can go there just like in Zelda. Like, that's very exciting. But I will just end this to say I don't really need the open world as much as I want a lot of variety. I would even say you could do the Odyssey thing, but just make less worlds, but make each one a lot bigger. And each world can also have its own collection of areas. You could have one map that's, you know, way smaller than Breath of the Wild, but maybe has like a snow area and a forest area in it. And what if you do 6 or 7 much bigger worlds compared to what Odyssey was? Stuff like that. You know, side quests and quests, they've also toyed with that in recent 3D games, and sure, you could take that to another level as well in a new 3D Mario game. So, lots of opportunities. I'm open to anything because I love all the 3D Mario games, even Mario Sunshine. I don't care what the haters say, I like Mario Sunshine, so I'm excited to see what they're going to do. Next question comes from the Mad Belmont at the Mad Belmont, who says, two-parter here. First question, what was the one game that instantly turned you into a hardcore Nintendo fan for life? Second question, what was the one moment that cemented your love for Metroid? Great questions. I've actually talked about all of these in the past, including recently. The one game that instantly turned me into a Nintendo fan for life is actually the same game that turned me into a video game fan for life. Not into a video game, but same game that turned me into a game fan for life. And it's the original Legend of Zelda on the NES that released in 1986 here in the States, where I would have been 5 or 6 years old. Now, I was already gaming before the NES released. When I would have been like 3 or 4, we had an Atari 2600, and I was playing that before the NES released. And I have actually pretty vivid memories of being a 3-4-year-old little kid playing Atari and being blown away by it. And the game that really stuck out to me is the original Pitfall, which is a very famous game from that era, and I loved the original Pitfall. I was like, this is a crazy jungle adventure, and it felt so real to me. But then, by the time the NES came out and just took gaming to a whole new level, and then it launched with The Legend of Zelda, the never-ending adventure for your Nintendo Entertainment System, which is what the commercial talked about, amazing. And playing that game and experiencing that 1986 version of an 8-bit open world and getting better tunics for Link and getting upgrades and finding the labyrinths they were called, reading Nintendo Power to know how to navigate those things, beating bosses, getting the bow and arrow, getting the raft, getting the better shield, the fairy fountains, the whistle. I mean, it just keeps coming back to me. You know, the music that's burned into my brain of the labyrinths, including the final and 9th labyrinth, which had its own unique theme, if I remember correctly. These are integral to my gaming DNA, and I was the perfect age, 5, 6, 7 years old, to play that game and just have my mind blown. And so obviously I was like, well, Nintendo's the greatest thing ever, but also The Legend of Zelda specifically just changed my whole viewpoint of the world. It was such an important part to my growing up as a gamer. So that's the answer for that first one, is the original Legend of Zelda for me. The moment that cemented my love for Metroid, I actually did make a video about this like 5 or 6 years ago, how I became a huge Metroid fan. The quick answer is, it was, I would say, in the 6 months to year after I had beaten Metroid Prime. Okay, so again, you guys know I'm old enough, I was alive in the 80s, right? So I did play and love the original Metroid on the NES. It was one of my favorite games, and also one of my strongest gaming memories was playing that game and talking about that game with friends at school. Metroid was such a weird, creepy experience, and the revelation that it was a girl you were playing the whole time was a big deal for, 7 and 8-year-old boys on the playground in the 80s. It was a big deal to be like, whoa, Samus is a girl. Did you know? Holy crap, you can play as her in a bikini, all that stuff. It was like a big deal. And Super Metroid, of course, was a huge moment for me as well. But I wasn't diehard Metroid fan after Super Metroid. It was after playing Metroid Prime, which I obviously got day one. I was working for GameStop as an assistant manager. I would have been 22 years old, and took Metroid Prime home, very excited. I was like, I like Metroid. I'm a fan of the games that I've played, which was Metroid and Super Metroid and a little bit of Metroid 2 on the Game Boy. But Metroid Prime I was excited for because 6th generation was exciting, GameCube was fresh, fancy new tech, the graphics looked so cool, first-person games were at the beginning of taking off, so it was exciting to see what Nintendo was doing with it. I played through the game, I loved it, it was very difficult, but it was beautiful. I was like, I'd never played a game like this, it blew my mind. But it didn't really settle in as my favorite game of all time and convert me to a huge Metroid fan until, like I said, 6 months to a year later, because as I continued to play other games after I'd beaten Metroid Prime, I don't remember exactly what it was, but over that period of time, I started to realize that Metroid Prime was a game that was sticking with me. It wasn't leaving my brain. The music and the atmosphere, the soundscape, the visuals, the gameplay, the bosses, it just never left my subconsciousness, right? As I was living life and hanging out with people and having a girlfriend and playing other video games and working for GameStop, talking to people about video games, this thing was always nagging at the back of my brain, and it was Metroid Prime. It's the only game like it. It's incredible. And so I don't remember if I went back to play it before or after Metroid Prime 2, but what I do know is I realized I think this might be my favorite game of all time. And then my hype for Metroid Prime 2 was so huge, and when I played that game and it was also so great, I was like, I think Metroid's it, man. And so that experience, which really started with the completion of Metroid Prime for the first time, solidified me as a lifelong diehard Metroid fan. And the last question comes from dashing_dev at dashingvision, who says, do you think the Switch will surprise us with more games next year, or will Nintendo's next console be the one to bring back classic franchises which have kind of been forgotten? Star Fox, F-Zero, Metroid Prime. So, looking to the future with 2024 right around the corner, right, which is the whole conceit of this video, you're asking about what Nintendo will be doing as far as any new surprise Switch games next year. And it's such a good question because we all are kind of in this weird space where we're not quite sure what to expect from Nintendo in 2024. We only know about a few games, and only one of them is new, right? Princess Peach Showtime is new, but other than that, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, Paper Mario Remake, and Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. If there's any other confirmed Switch game next year, I'm brain farting it, but it's definitely not a huge game, I wouldn't think, right? So we know those 4 games for sure, and they're all Mario games, and only one of them is a new game, which is Princess Peach. So we also expect there to be the next-gen console revealed and maybe released next year. So if that happens, does the Switch 2 impact Nintendo's desire to release anything else specific to the Nintendo Switch in 2024? My answer is maybe, but kind of probably not. I'm kind of leaning towards no, because I really think that by the middle of the year, we will bare minimum know about the Switch 2. So I'm guessing June. Maybe they do something crazy where they reveal it in January and it releases in April or May or something. So we might even be playing it by summer. But I think that at worst, it will have been revealed before summer, and then we will know it will release like at the end of the year during the holiday. And because of that, I think that the bulk of their content is these 4 Mario games. Now, they might reveal another, like, smaller tier game, nothing to the level of Star Fox, F-Zero, or Metroid, and I don't even know what that could be, so I'm not even going to pretend to guess. I mean, I don't know, maybe like another Kirby remaster spin-off, you know, or some other kind of re-release of an older game. I mean, maybe Metroid Primes 2 and 3, for example, so maybe something like that, which would be great. But as far as new games that are designed for the Switch, I don't think we'll get anything before the Switch 2 is revealed. Now, after the Switch 2 is revealed, and this is all theoretical, remember, after the Switch 2 would be revealed, I could see Metroid Prime 4 or a new 3D Mario game or Mario Kart 9 or some significant launch game for the Switch 2 also being announced to have a Switch version, right? So, I've been saying for a while, Metroid Prime 4, probably cross-gen. So, stands to reason they could reveal the Switch 2, they could confirm Metroid Prime 4 is launching with it, but we're also releasing a version of the game for the Switch, right? So that becomes a big Switch release, same if it's a Mario game or anything, Splatoon 4, whatever. Anything that might be releasing on Switch 2 and Switch would be a big game releasing on Switch. But I think your question is more about if they would do something specific to the Switch to still add value to the current Switch, even in a world where we know the Switch 2 is coming. And that's where, I mean, I'm not putting all of my chips on this because they certainly could surprise us with something significant, but I just lean towards thinking, no, they won't reveal any other huge Switch-only games. Any other big first-party Switch titles that would come on the current Switch in 2024, I believe, will probably be cross-gen and also have a next-gen version releasing alongside of it. So with that, that is my Q&A today. Again, thank you guys for asking questions. Again, if I didn't get to your question, I apologize, but I only had time for so many. I give very long answers to these questions because I like chewing the fat on a really good question. So again, I will remind you, you should definitely subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to cross 25,000 subscribers in the next couple of months. That would be great. And follow me on Twitter again because I'm super active. And whenever I do these Q&As, I always ask you guys on Twitter for these questions. So that is the place to do it. So again, thank you everyone for asking questions. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a great new year, even though you will see me again before the new year. And so that's about it. Thanks, guys. I'll see you next time on another video.